Hello, good morning, and welcome to everyone who's already here bright and early. I love it. Welcome to the second day of the 34th Annual California Small Farms Conference. And if you're here to attend from community gardener to farmer, you're in the right session. My name is Beatriz, and I'm with the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, and I'm so excited to have you all here today as this year big event. We have some amazing speakers here. I'm very thankful for panelists coming today and sharing their knowledge and inspiration with us. And also a big thank you to our sponsors who made this year's conference possible. Before we begin and get this show on the road, I do want to point out that there is a chat room, and this is a place for you to introduce yourself, have conversations, and we just ask that you keep those conversations constructive and kind. This is being recorded and we will be posting it online for people who can't tune in today, can tune in later on in the future. And there is also a Q&A function in this webinar. This is where we encourage you to ask questions to the panelists, and when they have the time, they'll go ahead and answer those for you. And lastly, at the end of this webinar, you'll see a quick eval pop up in your screen. And if you could just please take a few seconds to answer those questions for us, that would be very helpful to CAF and our staff. And yeah, awesome. Without further ado, I'll pass on the mic to our amazing panelists, and let's get this show on the road.
Thank you so much, Beatriz. Yeah, it's great. It's great to be here today. Happy Monday, everybody. It's you know, I'm on. So my name is Rashid Hislop. I'm a farm to market specialist with the Community Alliance with Family Farmers. For those, maybe joining for their first workshop, welcome to the Small Farms Conference. It's a great event, whether virtual or in person. And, for those who don't know, there will be in-person events happening, regional events happening on Thursday, all day throughout the state. I'm hosting my own in Fresno, here in the Central Valley. So I'm here, I'm a farm to market specialist with CAF. I sit on unceded Yokut lands in Madera, which is just north of Fresno. And I wear a few other hats as well. So outside of my role with CAF, I'm also co-founder of Black Socolo, which is a movement towards a cooperatively owned Black Indigenous people of color cooperative farm, land-based learning center here in the Central Valley. And I also sit on the California Farmer Justice Collaborative's Farmer Governance Committee. And I'm a board member of the Fresno Freedom School. So those are some of the hats that I wear, and the families that I belong to, so to speak, coming into this space. I would encourage everybody else also to, in the chat, use the chat, as Beatriz had mentioned, to introduce yourselves, where you are at, your name, of course, and especially questions that you're coming in with will be extremely helpful for us in terms of guiding this conversation. This isn't going to be the typical panel where I just ask all the questions because I know what all the questions should be and what they are, and our panelists just we go down the bullets and call it a day. We want to know what you are interested in learning and where you're at in your journey between being a gardener to a farmer, or all in between, today. So before we go ahead and just jump into everything, I wanted to give us a chance to ground ourselves. So for those of you, everybody joins webinars in different situations. You might be driving, you might be, sitting at your desk, you might be taking a walk. But I'd ask for everybody to just take a moment and we'll take some deep breaths together. And then we'll go ahead and roll into doing some acknowledgement of ancestors, and before we start our program. So let's just take some deep breaths together. This first one. Let it out. Another one here. One more. Thank you. Just gives us a chance to connect back to the breath, center ourselves, and be prepared for a really hopefully connecting and useful conversation today. So in terms of our next, I know folks will be coming in as we continue to start. But to start us off, I wanted to go ahead and acknowledge our ancestors. And in doing this, it's personal, right? It's for everybody. We're all one human family, but we all have very specific, loved ones, and those that we knew in this earthly life, or those who maybe we never got a chance to meet. But we still are connected and we still acknowledge them. So I'm just going to take a moment here to recognize our ancestors, the ancestors of these lands. Where I sit is on Yokut lands here in Madeira, but wherever you're at, it's important to consider the original land stewards of where you're at. And also, I also like to think about plantcestors. We were talking about that the other day too. So not just thinking about human beings being ancestors, but also plants, and think of all the cycles of life that have come to bring us to here where we're at right now. So if we could just take a moment, I'll be quiet and allow folks to do their own acknowledgements. Thank you. And I see folks starting to chime in and to chat, and I appreciate that. And let's keep that rolling, keep that going in terms of just introducing yourselves, where you're coming from today. If you don't know about, the native peoples of where you're at, don't let that stop you from, please don't let that stop you from introducing yourself. That's fine. I will at some point in the day, in our time, post a link where you can use to do that. I'm not going to research it right now, but there's a link that has a map that you can use to find your the native peoples where you're at. Okay, so without further ado, I wanted to actually one more time, because we did have a few other people. I've seen, we probably had about 15 people join us since we more or less kicked things off. And so I would like to ask again, you can use, if you want to use the Q&A, there's a formal Q&A link that you can use to actually post a question formally. You could also just put it in the chat if you're coming in with specific questions or even topics. And thank you, Stephanie. I see that you have done that and included information. Stephanie says, I'm here because I have been interested in transitioning into farming versus just writing about farming, and want to learn more about what this looks like in a practical sense. So thank you for that. And also thank you, I think, Ana Victoria, for posting the land map so that I didn't have to. Appreciate that. I feel really strong sense of CAF community going on here, and just community in general. And I see lots of people introducing themselves. So let's just keep that going. To one of the things I wanted before we, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists. I wanted to also say we will be directly using what you write in the chat to guide our conversation. So again, thank you, Stephanie, for being the first victim, so to speak, to write that in. And anything is relevant. Anything and everything is relevant. And so far, you know, I get a sense that we might have quite a few technical assistance providers or people that write about farming, but haven't done it, right? You haven't actually gotten out there and worked the land towards, you know, feeding your community beyond, you know, at a level beyond, you know, gardening and just growing the food for yourself. So that's something that we'll definitely come back to. And I'm going to hand it over now to Patricia. We are going to, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist, Patricia Miller. There's so many things that I could say about Patricia. Patricia Miller is program manager at Edible Schoolyard in Stockton. She's also a co-founder of BUFA, that's the Black Urban Farmers Association in Stockton and in French Camp. She's also a CAF board member, as well as a co-founding member of California Black Farmers Rising. Patricia is an incredible land steward who has seen the whole spectrum of going from a gardener to a community gardener to an urban farmer and beyond into community food systems work. And I'm so honored and so grateful for her agreeing to join us today as a panelist and to share her knowledge and her wisdom. And I welcome her, and Patricia, you have the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Rashid. Thank you, CAFT. All of the folks behind this amazing presentation. I thank you for continuing to support what we have accomplished and what we will accomplish. Brother Nelson, good morning. It is amazing to see you, and I am extremely excited about our work today. And to let you know that this is not only the beginning of a beautiful family relationship built on trust and support, and the need to understand where you are at in this session is going to help us design and respond to your need. So thank you. Thank you again, Rashid, for this amazing work. Brother Nelson, wait, let me back up. Brother Rashid, was there anything else I was supposed to share at this point? Because I know storytelling is coming up in just a little while.
That's perfect. And I appreciate you just being so self-aware and aware of everything that's going on. So we're just going to have you introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to throw up a quick poll, and then we're going to dive into some storytelling.
Wonderful. Brother Nelson, I hand the mic to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Patricia, for your lovely words. Give thanks to Rashid and CAF for this very important discussion today. And as they mentioned, yeah, my name is Nelson Hawkins. I am a co-founder and lead grower for We Grow Urban Farm. We're a diversified urban farm in West Sacramento on unceded Patwin lands. We also have a half acre in North Sacramento on Nisenan lands. where we grow a seasonal variety of diversified vegetables and fruits, and we supply that to the community surrounding our urban farm in West Sacramento through our farm stand. We do a seasonal CSA program, community supported agriculture program, as well as tap into some other markets in our area as well. Like Brother Rashid said earlier, you know, we wear many hats. So that's one hat I wear. I also am a policy advocate for Farmers of Color Advisory Committee with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, as well as leading a project for land sovereignty and land access for farmers of color right here in Sacramento. So I don't want to take up too much space on that because I'm sure we're going to get into those topics later. So a little bit about some of the hats I wear.
Thank you so much, brother. I have a poll for everybody that I'm going to launch right now, and I would appreciate if people could just fill it out. It's super simple. It's just on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being a gardener and 5 being a farmer. Where would you place yourself on the scale? All right, so, you know, I'm sure we're going to have some in-betweens and some extremes, but just seeing, oh, thank you. Got lots of responses already. Oh, wow, we're already up to 31. I love it. This is like the easiest poll ever, right? 36. Oh my gosh, we're gonna get to 100%. I'll give it 25 more seconds. We'll give a full minute for this poll to finish, and then we'll end it and move forward. So far, the wide majority are right smack in the middle at 32%, saying that they are number 3. So they're right in the middle. They're like, I'm almost a farmer. I'm getting there. And then second to that is 1. So 26% saying that they're 1. So a lot of people, and the list skews, and we only have 8% saying I'm a farmer. That's 3 people. So, and of course we know that you can be a gardener and a farmer at the same time, right? So there's definitely a lot of overlap. You know, plenty of farmers do continue to, and I'm sorry, Julio, that the poll did not come up for you. If you want to write in what you would have said, we can, I can include that in the results as well. So we're at a minute on the poll. I'm going to go ahead and end it. Sorry, Julio, that it didn't come up for you. So I'm going to share these results with everybody so you can see. And so, yeah, a lot of people are right in the middle. And then, but it skews also toward, it skews more towards gardening, you know? So that's where we're at. I wanted to get a temperature check, and that's great. That's great to know. And thanks everybody for participating in that. That helps guide our conversation as we go forward. So all about student-centered learning here, and that means listening and actually doing things that will serve you, the attendees here. So as we get into it now, I'm gonna keep the magnifying glass, if you will, on Brother Nelson Hawkins. And I want you to tell us, Brother Nelson, about yourself and who you are, and how did you become a farmer?
Thank you, Brother Rashid. Yeah, before I go into that, I just want to express my gratitude to everybody that's in the room. I want to acknowledge the fact that, you know, y'all could be anywhere at any other panel right now. You could be at any other conference. There's so much things going on, and y'all chose to be here. So I just want to ground the discussion in that gratitude. But yeah, I had the same process in my life too, going from gardener to farmer. When I grew up in the Sierra foothills in a little town called Auburn, and there at the time when I moved up there wasn't a whole lot of people of color. It was majority, you know, Caucasian folks, older folks, and they didn't really have a whole lot of, you know, favorable opinions, or there's a lot of prejudice towards people of color. So my experience and my relationship to land and farming and gardening kind of came about through a series of things that happened in my life. Especially the people that were into farming were you know, I'll just say that they weren't really welcoming to people of color, Black folks in particular, which is my background. So at the same time, you know, Auburn has a lot of beauty to it. It has a lot of nature, rivers, trees. And so I found a lot of solace in grounding and getting connected with nature and plants and animals, those type of things. And it really started when my mother had a garden. And as a young kid, it was kind of like, oh, we're going to be in the yard. It's kind of like chores. And I kind of associated with that. But then just kind of like being connected with tasting the fruits and the vegetables and those type of things really had a connection with me at an early age. And one thing that was kind of a turning point was both my parents got cancer. So at that time, I was looking into, like, you know, there's a lot of different causes of cancer, you know, environmental and those type of things. But it really opened my eyes to see like what we put into our bodies that can cause cancer, things that have pesticides in it, toxic chemicals and those type of things, as well as how food can be a source of healing and can help our cells and our bodies heal from and prevent those type of diseases that are diet related. So I was very disconnected from where my food came from, and didn't set well with me. So at that time, I really wanted to learn as much as I could. I went down the rabbit hole of how food was produced, what came with it, and I learned a lot about how industrial agriculture exploits land, exploits people, and is very extractive and causes a lot of suffering, as well as a lot of pain and toxicity. So as I went down that, it didn't sit well with me, and I wanted to make a difference in my own life and those around me. So I started to get as much experience as I could. Like I said, I didn't really come from a farming background, so I volunteered on farms. I got, you know, internships and any type of opportunity I could, just to get the experience that I could, and really focusing on a ecological or regenerative form of farming that works with nature rather than actively fights against nature. So a lot of that process came about, you know, just trying to hustle different jobs. I learned how to grow food on small scale farms, like anything from like 5 acres to 10 acres to 100 acres. I worked on a fish farm. So really just trying to get as much experience as I could in that transition. And as I transitioned from that mindset of like, oh, I'm growing food for the community, I'm growing food for my family, and really wanting to be connected with my food sources and those type of things, I had the long-term goal. Okay, the average age of farmers is getting towards retirement. We got all this corporate consolidation and control in the food system. And as I was learning more and more about those things and those injustices on this land, I'm like, that's not the way we need to go. We need to change course and take it upon myself within my own life and then the community around me to start building a system that works for us and for everybody. So through that process, I was able to get some opportunities to go to community college, and then I got a opportunity, a scholarship to go to UC Davis, you know, the quote unquote top ag school in the nation, which gave me a lot of opportunities that I'm blessed with in a community and a network to really launch the farm that we started in 2018 after I graduated. So through those processes, you know, I had some painful experiences in my life dealing with racism and injustices. When a friend that I grew up with was murdered by the police, unarmed, and my brother-in-law died in police custody. So, you know, and you know, we just want to honor all those that have been lost and suffered from police violence in this moment. And those experiences really activated me in a way to lead change and to make it better for the next generation, for my kids and their kids, so that they don't have to experience those type of things. And so that, as I bridged that gap between like growing food, as I was already on that path to getting as much skills and knowledge as I could to catch up and get the experience that I needed to start a farm, I also wanted to do more than just grow food. So I was involved in a lot of activist movements, from police accountability to rights of unhoused folks to environmental justice and justice for indigenous folks on their lands, as well as going against these power structures in the food system, Monsanto's and such. So within those movements, I saw the beauty of a collective energy of so many people working together side by side and unifying and really feeling that power of collective action. But at the same time, over time, I just saw so much effort going into a system that's not broken, but fixed in place, that creates these outcomes of injustices. So over time, I'm like, and seeing so much division within these movements by design, that I'm like, okay, what can we do to bring people together and unify and build something from the ground up in the grassroots movement? And what came to mind was food. When we break bread at the table, food has a powerful ability to bring people together and build and grow, and the conversations, and really, really bringing people together in that sense. But also just being around plants, like our urban farm right here, is in an area where a lot of people don't, they don't really interact. There's a lot of, just people trying to get their way, a lot of animosity. But you seeing the witnessing of people in the community just going out of their way to come into a space that's green, full of life, full of energy, plants, animals, insects, all those type of things, and seeing the transformative power of that in my own life, and then witnessing in the community around us, really made me feel like, okay, food has the ability to break all the barriers or anything that we perceive as differences or challenging us to unite to each other, and really building up from the ground up, literally. And in so doing, we've been able to bring a grassroots movement together right here and really build up the local regional food system. And so experiencing those type of things really made me see that food has the ability to not only feed ourselves, feed our families, feed our communities, but also at the same time unify folks and have healing on the land as well.
Thank you, brother. That was that was tremendous, and resonated for me in many, many ways, in all the work that I've been able to be a part of as well. Yeah, I think for a lot of people as well, there were many chats coming in as you were speaking. And I think it resonates for a lot of us, if not all of us. So I'm going to turn over to Patricia now, with the same question. Who are you, and how did you become a farmer?
Thank you, Rashid. Nelson, you touched my spirit and my soul on everything that you have shared with the group. And that resignation is going to propel me to get excited about sharing my story. Who am I? Patricia Miller, the community engagement manager with the Edible Schoolyard Project in Stockton, California. I sit on Miwok land. But my background, the majority of my life, I grew up in San Francisco, with a large portion of that growing up on the Presidio. And that is where my father retired. So my childhood was traveling around the world with my family. And growing up in Italy was an amazing journey for myself to remember the things that I saw on the world. Been to Egypt, spent some time there. When we returned to the States in 1969, we landed in Salinas, California. My mom family. And back then, what I realized was there were no Black farmers. There were no folks that I could connect to other than my grandmother, who grew in a small plot on her land our food. Realizing that that was my first introduction to gardening and farming. Those folks that I saw were Hispanic and had Hispanic and Native American. So realizing that it never dawned on me, other than my grandmother and my mother and my aunt had a way around the kitchen that brings us back to food and how we share the stories of who we are. And I must say that that food was considered, and I heard it, this was soul food. So what does that mean when we can associate our well-being and our connections to the land was through soil, but also soul. So when we left Salinas and we moved to the Presidio, military life, it was a culture shock for me from being in Italy, being in Egypt, coming back to the United States. I still never saw a Black farmer or Black farmers. So 35 years ago, in 1987, I moved to Stockton. It was a place where I saw a lot. There were so many Black folk who had a dis-ease and inequalities to their own right to healthy land, healthy food, and healthy water. So the other BIPOC community that I saw were the Southeast Asian community in growing food. When I saw where I landed with the spectrum, I directly felt the disproportionate impact on seeing health disparities. Finding out that the Port of Stockton was moving at that time over 67% of food in the world. In spite of all of the food insecurity, that it was very shocking, and I could not understand why poverty was so high. And that's when I began searching for the quality of food and land and water that I wanted and I needed to thrive just for myself. And that's when I began to see racism emerge, because I was asking all of the right questions, but folk did not value me in those arenas. So what does that mean? I had to elevate myself to understand what access meant and what good food looked like. So I traveled on my bicycle from Galt to Modesto, riding the back roads and seeing all of the land, seeing the farmers who did not look like me. I had some encounters that I wasn't fearful, but it made a very strong impact that I knew I had to do this. And that was grow food for my community, grow food for my children's children in order to be successful. And at the end of the day, thrive on so many levels. At that point, that was probably about 4 years when I realized I can do this. I want to do this. I have the knowledge because I engaged with the farmers who accepted me. And I was very humble about that engagement, about that trust, about building communication, but also at the end of the day, being able to sit at their table to listen and engage on what they had to offer me with knowledge, with skill, with education, but food. At that same time, my career work was, I got hired by Stockton Police Department, and I gave them 27 and a half years of my life. My ability to work with law enforcement at that time, it was part of my purpose because I wanted to see change. I wanted to have an impact on building trust in the community. And I was very successful in doing that. At the same time, every police chief that I worked with, I had the ability for them to understand this is about food. And they let me incorporate that piece of my life within my community. There were so many positives. At the same time, there were still a lot of negatives about what Nelson had shared. That's a real thing about our Black and Brown community having the loss and the hurt behind what was actually going on. So at that point, within an additional 6 or 7 years, I built 8 community school gardens within Stockton Unified. I built the awareness around food as medicine for people to start using that terminology. Whenever I talked about farming to the Black and African American community in Stockton, there was triggers because that disease brought them back to slavery. And that was never my intention. That was never what I wanted to make, how I wanted anyone to feel. But that's real truth about what farming has done and the years of having to rewrite that terminology. It came with one word, changing farming to agriculture and building the agriculture community and support and education for young people in Stockton. I said, yeah, I'm gonna grow food. and I'm going to grow food on a big scale because those Sunday dinners were amazing. Okay. My first piece of land that I personally bought, I had an acre in my backyard. And my neighbor who taught me, he asked me one thing. He said, Pat, we need to put a community garden right here in your backyard. We need to build raised bed boxes. We need to have the tools so that our senior citizens, our young folks, neighborhood where I bought my first home had 5 liquor stores, had no grocery stores, had a very large population of senior citizens who, what their challenges were was asthma and air quality. So Jerry and I, who was my neighbor, we built 8 20 by 20 raised bed boxes with compost from our local distributor. And that first winter, we had the ability to grow over 600 pounds of collard greens and mustard greens, and we gave it all away to our community. That was the first piece of what I knew to be true. I can grow this food. I can make sure that my community is successful and thriving at the same time. So that impact of my work gave me movement and impact to go forward for this change. And it felt good. So a few years into my law enforcement career, I got a chance to build a 6-acre farm along with an organization, nonprofit organization called Fuentes, which means building bridges. And 12 years later, I am now the community engagement manager and urban farmer. And that's why I'm sitting out here in the cold underneath the canopy, freezing. It's beautiful out on the farm because, as you can see, there's highlights of sun, but my Wi-Fi connection is limiting me here in this space. So I am warming up with excitement, and I'm gonna enjoy this conversation with you all. So thank you, CAFT, for allowing me to be a part of, and with the invite of being one of the board of directors. CAFT has stepped up to the plate. The struggle for me was making sure representation was within their organization, and now I'm seeing it right here today with all of the beautiful faces and the folks behind the scene with CAFT, and the third year that I've gotten able to participate in the Small Farms Conference. So I hope I was able to share with you and get those questions in the chat so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. I always get some chills whenever I hear your story. And it's very inspiring and also very connecting for me to hear it. For those that don't know, my background, just why it feels very connecting is just because I was basically raised in this food and agriculture game and schooled by Black women in New York City. Karen Washington, others who are less well known, Yonette Fleming, Ina McPherson, and the list goes on and on. So it's very connecting for me to hear your story, Patricia, because you're not alone. There's a whole army of you, and I'm so grateful for all of you the work that you do and the ripples that go out and just continue to reverberate. So I appreciate everybody that has been able to share where they're at in different respects. And people are in different places. Some people are just starting to put seeds in the ground first time, or, you know, maybe they're just trying to get a handle on how to grow food. And others are really trying to scale up. And so I wanted to ask the first question, and we might even only get to one, you know, overall question, you know, without going into specific questions that people have. But one of the questions that I think is that translates across all of them, all of the people in our session today, is about scaling up. And so the question is, what are some of the challenges to scaling up in production as a farmer that you feel like you do actually have some control over? Because there's the ones you don't have control over. And I don't think we want to, you know, I think we've touched on a few of those: social, political, you know, economic. But what are the ones you do have control over? And how have you been able to meet those challenges? And either of you can grab this one first.
Yeah, I think that's an poignant question. And what comes to mind for me initially is really just the mindset and kind of like the approach to growing. So in a garden situation, you might be focusing on, you know, one plant or a handful of plants and how they interact and relate to each other. You're paying more attention to the detail of those specific plants. And as you scale up, you got to really look at how the whole field operates and functions. And, you know, you're not looking at the health of one plant individually, but you're looking at, or one animal if you're raising animals, but you're really looking at how the whole field, how the health of the whole field, and how all the pressures that could come with that field, right? Like we talked about, political and social pressures that can come into play, that may be out of your control. But one thing that does come into your control is time. And as you scale up, you'll realize that how valuable your time is. When you're out there weeding, you know, you have a purpose in every task that you're doing, and you want to make sure that, you know, your time is not wasted. If you're spending all day doing something, then all of a sudden, you know, the irrigation goes out or something happens like that, which is common. You might have to address that right away. So knowing where your time is being spent and valuing your time, I think, is the most important thing to take into account.
Nelson, could you also share about MAP?
Oh yeah. So I have this acronym called MAP. So MAP stands for making a plan, right? So when you're a garden situation, or you know, whether you're growing for yourself or your family, you know, you might be going, you know, you might be just looking, like I said, you might be focusing on the attention to detail for the small stuff. But as you and you know, as you look at maps, what is a map really? You're zooming out and you're looking at things holistically. You're seeing how the systems and how the whole operation functions, and you want to take a step back and look at things from kind of that perspective. And you can look at it through you know, any type of scale that you're looking at. But when you're talking about making a plan, you want to consider the time scale that you're operating on. So let's say your end goal is you want to make a CSA box, a community supported agriculture box, right? Where your community is gonna purchase these boxes on a regular basis throughout the season, and they're gonna get a mix of stuff. So if that's the end goal and that is the purpose of your farm, or you know, how you're gonna function, then you want to make sure that you have a plan in place that you can meet those needs at the right time. Let's say you're just doing the summertime from June, like for our CSA is from June to October, right? So we want to make sure that we have things in production and actually harvestable in June. Otherwise, that's going to set back everything in the season. So if I want tomatoes, onions, okra, sweet potatoes, or those type of things, any type of crop that you're doing, you want to start off where the end goal is on a time frame, and then back up. Okay, tomatoes have a certain date of maturity, carrots have a certain date of maturity, and what that means is from when you plant the seeds or when you transplant your plants to when you can actually start harvesting that. So you look at the dates and the time that you need those things harvestable, and then you backtrack. Okay, if I get this in by early spring, then I'm good. Everything's going to be producing. So you really want to make sure that your plan is in alignment with what your end goal is. If you're just, if your end goal is to sell to restaurants or to go to the farmers markets, those things are going to be different in your plans. You might just grow one thing versus like a handful of crops or other products that you might produce on the farm. And another thing that comes to mind too is just the timing of it, as well as what your end goal is, and making a plan, and that plan is going to get refined over time. Your first year doing it, you might not have as much information, you might have as much experience to back it up, or for example, this year, there was a freeze at early March. I didn't plan for that. All my crops died in my plants, so I had to start over. That set everything off. You're going to be able to use that experience from your previous seasons, and that's going to get you have a more refined and a better plan moving forward in the coming seasons too.
Thank you, Nelson. I appreciate that, because that's the tidbit of what I believe folks are asking for. I've seen a couple of questions in the chat. So going backwards, Nelson, I love that, because it is all about time. So record keeping for me was my ability to scale up from a gardener to an actual urban farmer. And there are a few key points. Understanding, number one, understanding the zone and where you are growing your food. I live and grow in zone 9B. We have traditionally about 278 days of growing power, and that means having the temperature at 65 degrees or higher, right? So understanding that piece gives me the next phase of what I'm going to share with you, and that is realizing, how do you plant? Are you planting in a greenhouse? And what size is your greenhouse because of your seasonality in growing? There are definite timelines on when seeds will grow in a greenhouse, or will you directly sow to your soil, okay? Other factoring question is, are you yourself doing it, or do you have assistance? Depending on the land, and this goes back to a question that I saw in the chat, starting with my 1 acre, now 6 acres, that's a tremendous scale up. So it is, for me, it's done in quadrants and zones of a map that I created out on the farm. I always use a composition book. Some folks don't like to write in a book. And I'm not saying that that is wrong, because it is personal. but what I'm going to show you is the trusty dusty cell phone, where you, nowadays you can actually talk into your cell phone and the translation piece goes to your notes. It's all there, but you must do it. And being consistent on how you do that is always going to give you success, okay? With your composition book, there is a website that I have always used, and they didn't pay me to say this, but Farmer's Almanac has been around from the beginning, since the beginning of time. And currently, to date, this is how I build different locations where I'm farming. They have so many tools that it makes it so easy, but your consistency and time that you say 1 week, 1 hour out of that week, I am on Farmer's Almanac, and I am designing the layouts, from designing the layouts to understanding what I can actually pull on what Nelson said earlier. How many days do those seeds need to be in the ground? When will that crop be ready for harvest? And how many designing tools and tips we can grow in various zones depending on how much sun you get on your farm. So, and I tell you, after you're registered with Farmer's Almanac, you can actually publish your farm online, okay? So have a pen and your book or your cell phone with you every single day, okay? Your crop plan. Let me tell you, the crop plan sometimes scares gardeners, but farmers need that piece for crop rotation, for knowing what time of the year to buy your seeds, to have seed sharing days to incorporate and learn from other farmers that are in your networks. That crop plan for me, the one that I wrote in 2011, has not changed. It is the same crop plan every year. It is the same crop rotation, except for redesigning the areas on the farm. For me, is how do we maintain a no-till operation? Okay, because we are consistently putting back the nutrients by crop rotation, and knowing that the crop plan that I wrote in 2011 is still today the same crop plan, except for one thing. I have 150 fruit trees on my farm. Those, you don't move those. you build your crop by tree pruning every single year. So making sure, excuse me, that they get enough water, they have enough sun, they are thriving, they are growing. When do we harvest the fruit to be able to sell at either fruit farm stand, as part of a CSA, as far as maybe an educational piece that you may have on your farm, because the bees and the pollinators that you are attracting, they love the fruit trees. They love to be able to just hang out with farmers, and they are pollinating everything that you're growing. So with that, I think Rashid, I think I'm good.
Yes.
Okay.